Welcome back to another youth-centered podcast. Thank you, Bill Roberts at NATV, who has fixed all of our podcast equipment. I know we have been offline for almost a month now, so we're back up and running. Very excited about that, and we got some great shows coming up. But today, we're bringing somebody back, a man who needs no introduction, but most people know him as a educator at the North Andover Middle School, long-term educator. Remember when he first started here, Pat McGravey, who has agreed to come back on. We did say when we first had him on, we wanted to have him back a year later to talk about his baby, his project that he's kind of started in civics at the middle school. And we're going to talk a lot about how things are going, obviously even during the pandemic. And we'll talk about where the program's going. So first of all, Pat, thank you for coming back on the Youth-Centered podcast.
Rick, thank you so much for having me back here. I think our podcast last year was December 13th, so we're almost a year to a day, and I can't wait to talk about year 2 of the pilot.
Absolutely. Now, Pat, a lot of people do know you. You've been an educator for many years here, but let's give the brief, what I would call the McGravey files for people that don't know you. Who is Pat McGravey?
Okay, so I'm Pat McGravey, and I teach civics on 8B at the North Andover Middle School. I have been teaching, I think this is my 24th year. I grew up in North Andover. I actually went to the middle school where I teach. But I did go to Central for high school, and I used to teach U.S. history up until last year when the curriculum shifted to civics. I live in Melrose, Massachusetts with my wife, Amy, and my 2 sons, Bennett and Xander, who are in 6th grade and 4th grade.
Wow, the kids are getting big.
They sure are.
So, Pat, when you were here a year ago, we were talking about kind of a switchover from obviously social studies, as a lot of people knew it, to more of a civics thing. And I was very excited. You got me involved with this right along. I came in and did a program with the kids, which I love doing. And then, we'll talk a little bit later. I actually came back virtually to speak a second time, a little bit different on the remote, but I still love doing it and dying to get back into the classroom with you guys again. And you have tremendous people, which we'll be talking about, that have been guests for you. But let's talk a little bit about, since the initial year, how do you think the growth has been going with the program? Let's talk a little bit about, year 2 since we've talked. And, we got to deal with this little thing called a global pandemic that has actually come in. And I want to know how that's kind of affected what you're trying to do. So I'd like to just give you the platform right now to tell me where we are at with the civics program now.
Sure. Just a little background. In 2018, there was a civics bill that was signed into law by Governor Baker. It was actually written by Haverhill's own state representative, Andy Vargas, who has been into my classroom multiple times. And it was a requirement that 8th graders would have a year of intensive civics and a civics action project at the end of the year. In 2018, I was lucky enough to meet someone from the Democratic Knowledge Project. I'll refer to it as the DKP. And this is a program out of Harvard University. His name's Michael Blau. And Michael was telling me that in 2018, they were piloting this amazing hands-on interactive life skills course in civics in the Cambridge public schools. And they were looking to expand. And I was lucky enough to convince the DKP to come to the Merrimack Valley, and I piloted it in the year of 2019. And now I am going into the 2nd year of it. And before I talk about the growth and the change, I would just like to give a huge shout out to my students last year who were in the 1st year of the pilot. What I dropped on them in September, they had no idea what they were going to get. And it's because of them that this year is even bigger and better than it was last year. And so basically over the summer, I had an opportunity to work for the DKP, where the educators, we all came together and we completely revamped the curriculum. And for the first time in my 24 years of education, someone writing curriculum, someone in power, not only listened to my concerns and the other teachers concerned about the curriculum, but they completely modified and changed the curriculum based on our concerns. So I'm going into year 2, first of all, with a year under my belt of teaching all of the lessons, but I also have the privilege of being able to do it bigger and better and learning from my mistakes. So the second year of the pilot is going unbelievably well, and it's because of last year, and especially those students. I have to say, the success of the program is not about me. It's not about Harvard, and no offense to the DKP. It's about the students. They are the reason why this is a success, and I throw it all on them.
So when year 1 was over, when we wrapped up, what kind of feedback did you get from those kids? You say this is about the kids, this is for the kids, which obviously you and I are on the same page with that. But you must have gotten some good feedback from the kids. What did they say about this new way of us doing things in a social studies community called Civics?
So the feedback I got from the kids, I'd say the number one response I got from kids, and I'm getting it this year as well, this is not like any social studies class I've ever been in. First of all, there's no textbook, which is amazing. I mean, I myself have never been a textbook guy, but the kids not having a textbook, it's like a weight has been lifted. And not that reading secondary sources is not good, but that was lifted. And there's also there's no packets. It's not rote. It is literally every day. It is interactive and it's engaging. And I think the best feedback I got from kids is how engaging it was. And the other thing is they loved that they had an opportunity to speak freely. We weren't locked down to we have to finish it today. We carried it over into the next week. And so that was really, really nice where we're like, okay, kids, we have to get through chapter 17 in 2 weeks. And that's the beauty of a pilot. But I think the engagement and I think voice. I think kids really felt like their voice was being heard. This is a life skills class. It's the classic thing when we were all in school. When are we ever going to learn this? Why are we learning this? And I think kids had answers to those questions in so much of what we did. So I would definitely say the engagement and the voice were what I got from the kids from last year.
Yeah, I mean, the kids actually would say to me that it was just, they would describe it as different. They liked it. They enjoyed going to it. Your comment about the textbook's interesting. They kind of did like that it was, more like we're evolving every single day. We didn't have to follow a text, that type of thing. Tell me about like parents and, your administrators. So, year 1, it's a pilot. I remember when we piloted the youth center and I didn't know if there was going to be a year 2. So what kind of reaction did you get from the community at whole, specifically parents and, North Andover School Department administrators?
So I'm going to start with administrators. I'm going to start with George Gonsalves. So I went to George, and George was only, he was, wrapping up his first year. I literally had to go to George and say, George, what I'm thinking is piloting this curriculum from Harvard, and, giving him information about it. Lorraine Marks was the assistant superintendent, was definitely involved. And then, of course, Kristen Ando, the K-12 director of humanities. And so, first of all, what I had to do first is I had to convince the DKP to come to the Merrimack Valley.
Right.
That was a sell because they hadn't come out to the Merrimack Valley. Once I secured that, then I had to sell it to the powers that be. And I will give George total credit. First of all, I wouldn't say he was skeptical at first, but he was like, tell me more about this. And he learned more about it. And then, over the summer, he literally drove to Harvard, to Cambridge, met with the director of the DKP, Danielle Allen, who is a remarkable person, and Michael Blau, and we pitched it to him. And he was willing to say, I'm going to go to bat for you, and I am going to go to Dr. Gilligan and whoever it may be. And they allowed me to pilot it last year, and it went really well. The chairperson of the school committee, Helen Picard, who is also a huge fan of the program, she was nice enough to invite me to a school committee meeting to present the curriculum and the pilot. And I was really thinking outside of the box. And I was like, Helen, I want this to be about the kids. So the kids literally presented the pilot to the school committee. And actually, Mr. McDevitt's son was last year in the pilot. Miss Mabley's daughter, who was also on the school committee, is there. So I want to say, like, administration could not have been more supportive. I also have to give a shout out to a former administrator, your friend, Cheryl Raimondo. Cheryl was so supportive to me when I was, obviously every day was not a picnic. And Cheryl was always there. I mean, she's been there to support me so much throughout my career, and I miss her dearly. But I totally understand, she's retired, and I'm happy for her.
Yeah, she was a big supporter of you personally as a professional. Many times she talked to me about you, and then this program, it was important for her. And, I told her that I was going to have you on again, and she'll be one of the first persons listening to this. But it's always great to have that kind of administrative support.
It really is. It really is. And so now we get into the parents, and the one thing about this program is transparency was the number one priority. I wanted the parents to get everything. So weekly emails, access to the lessons, access to all the things. I did, a lot of introductory things with them, and the feedback that I got from parents, it was not 100% positive, but I would say a good majority was. And the number one thing, and I think I said this last year, as a parent of two kids, they tell me nothing about school. And parents were like, for the first time in a long time, Pat, or Mr. McGravey, my kids are coming home and they're telling me about what's happening. So I think what it comes down to as a parent is you just want your child to have an engaging, worthwhile experience. And so with those parents, it went really well. There were a small number of parents, and I think we had done in a little pre-interview that were not necessarily 100% on board. And I can talk about that now, or we can talk about that at another time.
Yeah, no, why don't you touch base here right now that obviously it's not kumbaya land. Not everybody's going to totally buy into it. But I know you, and I know how you are influencing to at least keep an open mind and an open, an open ear to what people are saying, and to try to make the program better. So let's touch base on maybe a couple of the people that, not by name, but, a couple of people dissenting about the program, or at least wanting to know more so that they could buy into it.
So, we did this podcast last December, and it was great, and I got a lot of good feedback. And there was a parent, a mom and dad, and they were like, so we're not 100% cool with everything in the curriculum. And I think they were all for a nonpartisan curriculum, but they saw things in the curriculum that they thought were partisan. They also thought that maybe Harvard possibly might have had an agenda, possibly. So that was something that, they definitely sent me an email, and they definitely unloaded with the issues, and they did their homework. They knew every lesson I did. They knew every project. They knew every assessment. The daughter was thriving in the program, and she was absolutely outstanding. So when I got that email, there was two ways to go. As a teacher, you can get defensive, like, how dare you question me? I have my master's in education. I didn't go that route. I really took the mantra of the program, and the mantra of the program is civic discourse. People with different opinions sitting down, talking, and not yelling at each other, and not blasting each other on social media. So George, again, was wonderful enough to facilitate a meeting. I think it was a 90-minute meeting, and we literally had a conversation. We had a civilized dialogue, and they were like, well, what about this? What about this? What about that? And, I would kind of counter. And at the end of the conversation, it sounds really weird, but I actually acknowledged a lot of the things that they said. And I was like, I never thought of it that way. And so I went back to the DKP, and explained, look, here's this, here's that. So let me give you an example. Like they were like, so you barely talk, the program barely talks about the American Revolution. It just goes into rights and freedom. What about the American Revolution? Like, why isn't that in there? And I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. And, if we can just to save some time, the founding documents and the Declaration of the Constitution, that was called Unit 2. And there was not a lot of American Revolution. So now we have Unit 2A and Unit 2B. And Unit 2A is completely about the revolution. It talks about the causes. It talks about so many things. So that issue that those parents brought to me, I brought to Harvard. And because of that civilized discussion that we had with one another, the program is better. And every single teacher is doing that. So to me, that was a civics lesson within itself, sitting down with that person. And I continue to have a great relationship with these parents. And I know they're not probably thrilled with everything that I'm doing, but I have a good feeling I'm probably going to have their daughter next year, and we're going to have more conversations. But
so you talk about this being like a real life civics lesson itself. I mean, to me, I love hearing this. So I'm somebody that's not afraid of feedback. I'm not afraid of people challenging me, maybe how I do things at the youth center. But my attitude is, let's have a dialogue. Let's talk about it. At the end of the day, some of their opinions I need to listen to, maybe adjust. At the end of the day, I'm going to probably, be the final word on how I'm going to do certain things. But to have that dialogue to eventually make your program better. I mean, the story you're telling me right now, probably, some people, like you said, might have gotten defensive as an educator. Some people might have shut down the conversation before it ever started. You didn't, obviously having a supportive George and obviously welcoming the parents in to kind of talk about that has obviously made your program better. I mean, is that fair to say?
Oh my gosh, it's made it so much better. And the lens of every single lesson, I'm thinking of those parents. I'm thinking of that family. I'm thinking of a multitude of families. My lens has completely changed. And what's beautiful about the DKP is they give you the curriculum, soup to nuts, everything, the entire frameworks, but you're allowed to go your own way. You're allowed to do your own thing. And they embrace it, and they have access to your lessons, and they make changes. And you know what? Year 3 is going to look a lot different than year 2. And that's a true pilot. That's a true pilot. So that was just, I just thought that was a great experience. And, it might be a little too raw now, but maybe in a year or two, I think that's an experience I can share with my students.
Sure.
And tell them that this is the way it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, kids don't see that with adults. They don't see it. I think with the election, I think they see it as two groups that are brawling and against one another, especially with social media. So the fact that we came together, just to kind of give a plug in for a Civics in Action talk I did last year with State Representative Christina Minicucci, whose son was in the program. She did a talk with State Representative from Newburyport, Jim Kelcourse, who's a Republican. And it was literally myth-busting. I told the kids I was having a Democrat and a Republican in the same room. The kids thought it was going to be a debate and an argument, and it was how they worked together. So those are types of that's a huge message that we have to get out to the kids.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm a big supporter of you personally and your program, and to me, from my lens, it looked very successful. I'm obviously hearing from you that there were maybe some little growing pains that you need to do it. Take me into the second year now. Yeah. So now you're a veteran civics person by 1 year, but you're a vet. You've got some ideas. You want to evolve the program. Talk to me about year 2.
So year two, I'm in the process. People may say I'm crazy, but it is going better than year 1 for a number of reasons. And I know we're in the global pandemic. The first thing is, as you said, I had a year under my belt. The second thing is I had, 3 or 4 weeks this summer to literally dig in deep with my colleagues at the DKP. and we hashed it out and we worked out some things. So when I arrived in, August or September or whatever, we, as we had so much going on with hybrid and cohort A and cohort B and the OLA kids I was teaching. And the first unit is identity, values, and agency. And it was literally, the attitude is the kids need to know their identity and values before they move forward. And it's unbelievable how many kids don't know their identity and values. I didn't know mine in 8th grade. I never even thought to take the time to think about it. And it was remarkable that these lessons in Unit 1 were my lifeline during a pandemic. Because the kids everywhere, remote, cohort A, they were all getting into it and they were all producing work. And it was just like, some of my colleagues were like, oh, this isn't working, that isn't working. And, I had to kind of quietly say, this is going amazingly well. And, we start off really easy, like, what's in a name? First, middle, and last name. And the kids had to research their first, middle, and last name. Kids didn't even know why they had a middle name. One kid, his first name is Beckett. He was named after Josh Beckett in the World Series of the Red Sox. That kid didn't know who Josh Beckett was. And another kid, had this middle name that he couldn't pronounce that was African. He didn't know that, it was an African dialect for, leader. So the kids were looking at their first, middle, and last name. And then we started having them look at their values. And I literally gave them a sheet of, 10 pages of values. We broke them down. And they did a project. If there was a memorial to them in the north end of our courtyard, what 3 values would be carved in each of the rocks? And what are they? How do you apply them? And kids were like, they were really digging deep into this stuff. And we were having these amazing dialogues about everything. And the quality of work that I was getting, it's unbelievable. We just did an identity project, which was the end of the trimester, end of Unit 1. The kids had to pick an issue of a change or an issue that they had in town, and they had to apply their values and their identity to it. And, I'm grading projects and I'm getting carpal tunnel syndrome because the kids are writing so much stuff. And they're writing about real issues. The OLA kids, some of the kids were talking about OLA. Some of the kids were talking about the hybrid plan. They were talking about a wide variety of things. And I was just completely blown away at the quality of work that I was getting from the kids. And, and some of the kids are very quiet, but when you see their work, it's unbelievable. So we just finished Unit 1 and we are now going into Unit 2. Unit 2, as I said earlier, is pretty much about the revolution, and it's basically giving the kids background on what was life like in the colonies, and then they have to make a decision. Would they have been a loyalist or would they have been a revolutionary? And there is a video game, like a graphic novel video game, that they're playing as this is going on. Again, what am I doing on my asynchronous days? My kids are playing the online video game. It matched up perfectly. It was like aligned in the stars. I don't know how to explain it, but the curriculum just works so well in this global pandemic. And so we have not lost a beat at all.
So let me ask you something. So, and I want to get into the reinvention of Pat McGravey during the global pandemic. But take me back to the beginning of the year where we weren't even sure we were going back to school, how we were going to go back to school, how we were going to teach, how we were going to educate, et cetera. And I'm just hearing you talk eloquently about the kids have done an amazing job, kind of sharing and getting. How much has the Civics project in the first curriculum of the year, how much has it been in checking on a thing that I'm a big issue on, is social emotional of our kids? So obviously you're trying to teach civics. Kids are doing this, learning in a variety of different ways, some probably handling it better than others, and we're doing this in a global pandemic. How has that, I think you said it's worked really well, but has there been ups and downs with trying to, one, bring across the curriculum that you've designed, how you want to do this, and the fact that, how are our kids doing? How did you mesh that all together?
So, last year I really got this really awesome perspective from the podcast that you and I had. And you really brought out something in me where we talked about me reinventing myself. And I think we talked about me taking my boxes of lessons and throwing them out the window and starting fresh. And like, that was so exciting to me. And you agreed that that's something that you would support. And I think we're probably in the minority. 24 years in, like, you're not coasting, you're starting again. So that was a rebirth. But then when the pandemic hit, and not the spring and also the fall, I really had to reinvent the way I taught. And not so much in the lessons, but I had to, the whole concept of outreach. I had to do so much outreach. Normally, before the pandemic, I'd grade a lesson, I'd grade an activity, the kids didn't do it, they got zeros, we moved on. But during the pandemic, something happened, and I was like, wait a minute, those kids with zeros, I gotta reach out to those kids. And some of the kids that had zeros were not kids that had zeros before the pandemic. So now I'm saying, why are these B+ kids not doing work? And you just said social emotional. They really needed outreach. And and again, I know that, some of my colleagues are going to disagree with me on this. And, we all teach the way that we teach. But I had to do things that I never thought I would do before the pandemic.
So talk a little bit about that. What were some of the outreach? Now, you're 24 years in as a teacher.
Yeah.
Next month, I'm 33 years at the youth center, and I'm totally reinventing myself every year. And I could see some, and no disrespect to any of your peers, but I could see some of your peers saying, Pat, you're kind of 24 years, you've done your whole thing, and you wanted to almost become a new Pat McGravey because you felt you needed to for the kids. Tell me about the outreach. How did you do it?
So the outreach was, it was this team effort of parent, kid, and me. And we'd have these things at meetings, but it really became clear that it would be an email. It would be a Google Meet, literally with mom or dad, the kids super uncomfortable, and me. And we would literally talk things out. We would get through it. I would say, why aren't you doing these things? The other thing, extensions. I mean, kids, obviously there's deadlines, and I know in the real world you do have to have deadlines. I became, I don't want to use the word lenient. I think a better word is understanding. I would reach out to kids, and I would try to be as positive as possible. And I would always say, whenever you reach out to a kid, say something positive to make them feel better, and then slowly drop. So I would say, like, hey, Jimmy, I hope everything's going well. I noticed that you didn't do the assignment. What can I do to help you with the assignment? And then, it might take 2 or 3 emails or 2 or 3 comments on a Google Doc or something like that. But they'd comment back, and they would say, well, I need this or I need that. And it was very, very successful. And obviously the spring was very different because it was a completely different way that we were teaching. Now it's more structured, more about assignments. And so what I had to do is, I had to be there for kids, and I really had to do a lot more outreach. And I never thought that I would have to do that. I was always, when I was in school and when I was a teacher, I was like, okay, I'm the teacher, you're the student, you do the work. If you don't do the work, that's on you, you move on. And now I'm saying to myself, well, why aren't you doing the work? Why is that kid not doing the work? And, for people that are skeptical, I mean, I will tell you, I would say before the outreach, I was getting maybe 40% of the kids doing stuff. By the end, once including the extension, I had about 85% of the kids doing it. So the proof was in the pudding there. But again, I know it's very controversial, and it's really, really hard, especially as an 8th grade teacher. The mantra I always remember is the veteran teachers that I taught with the first couple years were like, we're preparing you for high school. We have deadlines. And so I kind of had to put that aside. And, I'm always, if it's not broken, don't why fix it? It's working really, really well. And yeah, of my 116 students, did 18 of them struggle with the project? Yes. Did I reach out to 18 of them, I did. And
See,
only three of them didn't do it.
See, I call this the silver linings of the pandemic, right? So I'm quite frankly tired of hearing about, it's been a miserable 2020. I'll be happy when it's over. I'll be happy when a vaccine gets us back to a little bit more of normalcy. But what I'm hearing from you, Pat, is that, forget the pandemic for a second. I think you've learned that this outreach, regardless of this pandemic or not, can have a major impact on the success of your program and ultimately the success of our kid. I have to look at this as a life lesson for you that you'll continue to grow post-pandemic. Am I right on that?
You're absolutely right. And, with a vaccine or wherever we're back to normal, for how many years I continue teaching, this is something that's going to stay in my practice. This is not a pandemic practice. This outreach for me is something that's going to continue. And I honestly feel like I know my students a lot more. I mean, when I go on Google Classroom, for example, the project, kids and I assigned it 3 weeks ago. Kids and we were going back and forth with comments. Like, the comment thing was super long, and I'm saying to myself, geez, I don't know this kid in school at all, but through these comments, I'm really getting to know this. And there was this one young lady, she was petrified to do the project. Just absolutely petrified. And in class, she doesn't talk. And, I think she wanted to do a project on how to get more restaurants in North Andover. There's not a lot of good places to eat. And her and we went back and forth on the comments, and I just saw this growth in her. And again, it was only virtually. It wasn't live.
Right.
And she turned in this project, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. If I could compare what this kid was saying 3 weeks ago compared to the product, it's unbelievable. And it was funny. It was like this secret that, we don't say anything in the hybrid role, but we'll comment back and forth. And she's not going to raise. That's the other thing. It's anonymous. Kids can reach out on a Google Doc or a comment. I'm thinking, geez, this girl is going to raise her hand in front of all these kids and say, I don't get the project. That's another piece that, I never even thought about. If I was an 8th grader, I wouldn't want the class to know I was struggling with a project, but I never thought that, I just didn't think like that.
Well, I definitely want to hear her results because I actually agree.
200 out of 200, a perfect.
Wow.
Perfect score.
Awesome.
This thing, it was awesome. And, and I had my wife look at the project because I'm like, okay, obviously this is my baby here. I want you to look at this. And she's like, and she teaches college, my wife. She's like, if you could give, she's like, some of my college kids don't produce something like this.
That's great.
She didn't know how to research. She didn't know how to find reliable, citation, and her and I worked on that. I connected her with some business leaders. I was like, look, Dave Holland, he's my former student at Stachy's.
Yeah.
That's someone that could be an ally for you, and so we just all kind of came together, and it was great. And granted, is she talking more in class? No, she's still super quiet, but I could tell by her comments back to me that she saw a growth. And, and I think if this was before the pandemic, that might be a kid that just got a 70 and coasted through. But, I hope this is going to have an impression on her. Maybe it won't. Maybe it's a one-and-done thing. But I would hope that this would have an impression on her. And it wouldn't be just like this one isolated thing.
It's very exciting. Listen, we could talk forever, but I want to get to two more things. We got about 10 minutes left here, and I want to get to two major things. So we're finishing up our last few days before we'll break for the holiday, and obviously we're out for close to 2 weeks. And if you listen to the science, you listen to a lot of things. We could be in for a rough January. Hopefully, we at the middle school will still be able to continue to do hybrid, et cetera. But tell me a little bit about what's the next, you started talking about the second piece of it obviously in the second trimester. What will the rest of the year look like, regardless of how we're educating it, whether it's remote, in person, or whatever? What will the rest of the year look like for your civics program?
So, we didn't have an opportunity to talk, but I am having guests in virtually like yourself. And my goal is, once I figured out how to teach in the pandemic, and I haven't figured it out completely, but I want to do these Google Meets with kids live. That's something that's totally going to happen.
Yeah, if I'm correct, mine was on tape, right? And then you presented it to the kids?
So what I did was, so you and I did a Google Meet together,
Okay.
and we talked about this youth center being the ultimate civic action project. And the kids, they were probably more blown away live, but they were blown away virtually. They had no idea of what this project was. So my goal is in trimester 2, I want to do more Google Meets. Last year I had Harvard law students literally come into the classroom and run a debate on historic Supreme Court cases. I'm going to have them come in. The other cool thing that I'm very excited about is the DKP and Harvard. They have they're doing a lot of research, and they have actually picked North Andover Middle School as a case study school. So obviously a doctoral student from Harvard is literally going to be in every single one of my classes observing, and it's my OLA group of kids. It's my OLA group of kids because virtually that's the way it works beautifully. And they're literally learning from that. So that's amazing that Harvard is coming to North Andover to and it's all about what's going on with the kids. It's not really about me. And then the kids will actually have an opportunity to be part of the study themselves. Wow. So that is going to be amazing. And then obviously continuing moving forward, we're going to get more into the founding documents, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. We're then going to talk about a unit called Levers of Change and how to make change. And then there's going to be some research we're going to talk about research and reliable sites. And then the kids don't know this. I think they thought their identity project was one and done, but if they listen to this, they'll know this now. They're going to revisit the project that they did recently. And in April or May, they're going to do a civic action project where they're actually going to try to make this a reality. And I'm going to connect them with people like yourself, Senator DeZoglio, Senator Tarr, State Representative Tromwin, people like that. And so the goal is, by May, hopefully that curriculum will be done. And then we're really going to get into the civic action project that is required. So that's what we're gearing up to. So we're cranking along, and that's my plan. I felt very strongly last year that I was going to try to do as many lessons as possible and not change things with the pandemic. There is a modified curriculum that the DKP is offering remotely. I'm not doing that. I'm sticking to the original script, trying to give the kids the most experience. And some people might say, just bag the Civic Action Project because it's a pandemic, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So so obviously we're super psyched. I'm gonna get through the units and get to the project. So that's where my head's at right now.
I love that you're not going to give that up. You're going to keep moving forward. I think
try.
I think in a lot of ways the pandemic has allowed us to confidently maybe step back because it is a pandemic, and my attitude is we got to keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other. We're going to get through this pandemic. I don't want to take a step back on stuff. I am excited that after, I think it's even next week, you're going to have my good friend Diana DeZoglio, Senator Diana DeZoglio,
yes.
Who's actually working on a passionate project that I'm involved with. I'm going to act as a consultant. Methuen is finally going to build their youth center after close to 30 years of talking about it. Diana has been instrumental beyond belief in getting funding and getting this project off the ground, and I'm excited. I'm a Methuen resident, so I'm passionate about it. My kids are grown now, but it's going to be great that the kids in Methuen are going to have something similar to what we have in North Andover, and the fact that you're looped into this through the civics piece and obviously some of the stuff that we've talked about the last 2 years with your kids will be great. Let me ask you a final question. And my final question is, this program, I'm a big fan of it, right? And it's not because, I've respected you as an educator since the day I met you. Your passion for the kids, the passion for the curriculum is second to none. I love that you took on something. It gets very, I guess I get frustrated when, and again, it's people my age, a little younger than my age, that, they get set in their ways and they don't want to redefine themselves. They don't want to, come up with a reinvention and keep excited about your job. And that's one of the reasons why I've been here for 33 years is I treat every season as a different season. I get regenerated. The kids regenerate me. So let me ask you, in terms of a global pandemic, in terms of starting a new curriculum, which I think is here to stay, which I'm happy to say, what have you learned about yourself through the establishment of a civics program that, quite frankly, was not overly loved at the very beginning? People just didn't know what it was about. And then the fact that you're teaching and reinventing yourself during the pandemic. Who's Pat McGravey today?
Yeah, so Pat McGravey today is someone that's definitely passionate about civics. I was always passionate about U.S. history, but I really, again, with this outreach, I'm really trying to spread that passion everywhere. I'm also, I don't think I ever have acknowledged my community. My community it's just unbelievable. I mean, my first couple years teaching, I didn't know who was on the school committee. I didn't know the superintendent. I didn't know the assistant. I didn't know any of these people. And now these people have become my colleagues, and they have become my allies, and they have become my supporters. And I'm meeting so many people, whether it's, the Quick Pick Dunkin' Donuts, where they're giving gift cards so I can acknowledge kids. There's that. There's businesses that are supporting me. And then, of course, there are parents who are, really speaking up on behalf of this program. And one of the big things, and I think this is a good way to end, is we need to model to kids that if you want to get involved in civics, or if you just want to, deal with this civic world, you have to find allies. You have to find allies. And I have so many allies. The number of people on bad days, because every day is not a picnic, that I reach out to. I've reached out to you. I've reached out to Christina. I've reached out to Dr. Gilligan. I've reached out to all of these people, and they're always so supportive. So I think, when they call that, the community is a huge piece. And the other thing is, I see some of my friends and family members who are just miserable in their job. And I just love my job so much. And it's 24 years in, and it's just I'm not coasting. I'm trying to reinvent myself. So all of those things, it's just, I'm in a really, really good place professionally. And it just keeps getting better and better. And I'm already thinking about year 3 and how that's going to go. And just to think that hopefully the students and I are starting something like you started here with the youth center, with this youth center. I hope someday this continues, and we're planting the seeds of something remarkable that will get bigger and better, and beyond me. Hopefully, it will continue. So yeah, so obviously that's where I'm at right now. That's who I am right now.
Well, it's invigorating for me to hear someone like you. I always have a statement here: if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I live by that. I have probably many, many friends that make a ton of more money than me, but they're not as happy as me on what I'm doing. And you've got that same thing about you, and again, not all teachers that have been around for 24 years are stale and don't want to really reinvent themselves. I'm not trying to allude to that, but what I am trying to allude is a guy like you, your passion for your students, your passion for the curriculum, and your passion to teach kids is amazing. And I know the day that you do retire, it's going to be a loss to this community, because I know how much you put into this. So I want to appreciate you coming on the U-Centered podcast. I wish you the best of luck. This is going to be a yearly podcast for us because I really want to know where the curriculum goes. So year one, we saw some of the what I call growing pains. And I would think this year with the pandemic, it seems like things are going really well. And again, it's not going to always be roses every single day, but it's heading in the right direction. I honestly believe it takes 5 years to develop something that stays forever. And that's what I kind of base the youth center on. And it'll be interesting to see where you take this program in that final 5th year. So that's why I want to have you on every year just to talk about it. I do know that people in the community are talking about this. They talk to me about it because they've heard me outspokenly talk about the civics program or even being on your program, and I want you to make sure you sign me up every year. We can talk about other things besides the building of the youth center because a lot of civics projects take place every single day here at the youth center. So I want to thank you for coming on the Youth Center podcast.
Rick, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this forum. I got so much amazing feedback from the podcast from parents and students, and sending it to Harvard and the DKP. They really, really enjoyed it. And it was just, when I texted it and sent it to people, it was a huge celebration. And I even listened to the podcast a couple days ago just to kind of get my head in the game for this. And it's great that we're documenting this. And I really appreciate you being a supporter, and I really appreciate you having me on each and every year to document, what I think is going to be an amazing thing for North Andover.
Absolutely. So again, thanks to Pat. I am excited. Next Tuesday, and we're going to actually tape it for Wednesday release. We're having one of our summer employees, Andy Roby. Andy Roby's a college student that took a gap year this year because of the pandemic, and he chose to travel the country from East Coast to West Coast and back. He's become quite the photographer. His pictures and his blog that he wrote throughout the whole experience was mesmerizing to me. He's going to come on next week. We're going to talk about why he did this, how it went, the ups and the downs, and how he actually did it on a very cheap price also. And he's got some great stories to tell people. And then right after the holiday, we're bringing back Joe Clark, principal of the Franklin School, for taping number 2. We actually taped it number 1, and we found out that we had a problem with our podcast equipment, so that was actually what shut us down. So we're going to bring back Joe. It was a great podcast, and I'm sure it'll be great the second time through. So those are our next upcoming 2 shows that we're going to have. And, if anybody has other suggestions for topics, or even people like Pat McGravey, the presenters that you'd like to hear from, let us know here. Okay, so again, thanks to Pat McGravey. And as we finish every podcast, we always say too much passion is never enough passion.